For over a century, the American labor movement has faced calculated opposition from powerful interests working to erode workers' rights. From early violent clashes like the Ludlow Massacre to systemic efforts during the Red Scare, these attacks were not random, but part of a deliberate strategy by industrial elites and political forces to maintain wealth and influence. Key reforms under Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal, such as the Wagner Act and Social Security, empowered workers and transformed labor rights. However, systemic exclusions and opposition from wealthy families like the DuPonts and Rockefellers sowed division, weakening the solidarity crucial to the movement's strength. Fast forward to today, and the echoes of this history persist. As modern labor organizers at companies like Amazon and Starbucks fight for unionization, understanding the roots of this opposition is vital. The dismantling of labor rights over the last century provides a critical lens through which to examine today's challenges and the nationwide resurgence of workers' rights. The American labor movement grew stronger during Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal era. Faced with devastation from the Great Depression, the administration enacted transformative policies like the Wagner Act of 1935, which guaranteed workers the right to unionize and collectively bargain. Programs like Social Security and unemployment insurance provided a safety net, reducing workers' dependency on exploitative employers and establishing protections still recognized today. However, these advancements were not without limitations. Systemic racial biases excluded agricultural and domestic workers, fields predominantly occupied by black laborers, from key benefits. This exclusion created divisions within the labor movement, weakening its collective power and leaving millions without critical protections. The New Deal reforms also faced fierce resistance. Wealthy families like the DuPonts and Rockefellers funded campaigns to frame those policies as socialist overreach, threatening the free market principles. Organizations like the American Liberty League amplified this rhetoric, cultivating skepticism about government-backed labor protections. As labor's victories gained momentum, opposition intensified. By mid-20th century, the rise of anti-communist sentiment, coupled with the political influence of corporate elites, began to dismantle the solidarity and progress forged during the New Deal. These shifts set the stage for a significant erosion of labor rights in the following decades. The mid-20th century saw a calculated effort to equate labor activism with communism, leveraging Cold War fears to undermine unions and fracture solidarity. This period is known as the Red Scare, and this lasted from the late 1910s all the way into the 1950s. Anti-communist sentiment was weaponized to target socialist ideals central to labor's earlier successes. Industrialists and politicians capitalized on public fears following the Bolshevik Revolution, branding domestic labor organizers as subversive threats. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, under J. Edgar Hoover, intensified surveillance of union leaders, labeling them as potential communists. Laws like the Smith Act of 1940 criminalized speech advocating for government overthrow, disproportionately targeting labor organizers. By the 1950s, Senator Joseph McCarthy became the face of this crusade. His infamous hearings in the Senate Subcommittee on Investigations accused individuals in government, education, and unions of communist ties. Often baseless, these accusations destroyed careers and fostered a climate of fear, discouraging advocacy for workers' rights. Labor unions, already under structural strain, were further weakened by these tactics. Between 1949 and 1950, the Congress of Industrial Organizers, once a powerful advocate for workers, expelled 11 unions accused of communist affiliations. This fractured unity the unity necessary for collective bargaining, further isolating unions from public support. The Red Scare had devastating long-term effects. It stigmatized socialist principles and eroded the public's trust in labor organizations. This coordinated campaign fractured unions and marginalized the ideals that once underpinned their success, leaving lasting scars on the American labor movement. Heading out of the mid-20th century, the United States shifted from New Deal liberalism toward neoliberal economic policies, emphasizing deregulation, privatization, and free market solutions. This ideological pivot dismantled many labor protections and consolidated corporate power, leaving unions increasingly vulnerable. The administration of President Jimmy Carter marked the twilight of the New Deal era. Facing economic challenges like stagflation and the 1970s oil embargo, Carter introduced deregulation in industries such as airlines and trucking. While not overtly anti-labor, these policies signaled a retreat from federal support for unions and laid the groundwork for a broader shift in economic priorities. President Ronald Reagan's administration fully embraced neoliberal principles. Reagan's 1981 firing of air traffic controllers during the PATCO strike was the defining moment, signaling the end of federal backing for organized labor. His economic policies, known as Reaganomics, focused on tax cuts for the wealthy, industry deregulation, and reduced social spending, widening the power imbalance between corporations and workers. The rise of neoliberalism coincided with the consolidation of corporate influence. Driven by corporate lobbying, policies like the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947 restricted union activities, banned secondary boycotts, and allowed states to adopt right-to-work laws. These measures weakened unions' ability to organize effectively, further tipping the scales in favor of employers. As union membership declined, economic inequality surged. By the early 21st century, the top 1% of Americans controlled more wealth than the bottom 90% combined. This growing disparity was not incidental, but the result of decades of policies designed to favor corporations and the wealthy at the expense of working-class Americans. This shift eroded labor protections and reshaped the political landscape, leaving unions marginalized and workers increasingly disconnected from the institutions that once championed their rights. Despite decades of decline, the American labor movement is experiencing a resurgence. Workers at companies like Amazon and Starbucks have launched high-profile unionization efforts, capturing national attention and signaling a renewed interest in collective action. This revival comes amid growing economic inequality and stagnant wages, which have fueled frustration among workers across industries. Union petitions have doubled under the Biden administration, marking the first significant increase in decades. Workers increasingly use innovative tactics like salting, where activists seek employment at companies intending to organize from within. These strategies have gained traction in traditionally resistant industries, helping to rebuild momentum for labor organizing. This resurgence reflects a broader rejection of corporate practices prioritizing profits over worker welfare. Striking employees have highlighted unsafe working conditions, insufficient pay, and inadequate benefits, echoing concerns that unions historically fought to address. The movement faces significant challenges, however. Right-to-work laws in 27 states continue to weaken unions by allowing workers to benefit from union-negotiated contracts without paying dues. Corporate anti-union campaigns remain pervasive, with many companies investing heavily to dissuade workers from organizing. Still, the modern labor movement's resilience underscores collective action's enduring relevance. By revisiting the lessons of the past and addressing the persistent systemic challenges, today's workers are laying the groundwork for a renewed era of labor rights. The fight for unionization at companies like Starbucks and Amazon is more than a battle for fair wages. It's a pivotal moment in the ongoing struggle for equality and justice in the workplace. The so-called golden era of American society, often romanticized as a time of prosperity and growth, rested firmly on a foundation of socialist principles. Landmark policies of the New Deal, such as collective bargaining rights, Social Security, the minimum wage, and unemployment insurance, laid the groundwork for widespread economic security and upward mobility. These reforms, built on the ideals of solidarity and shared prosperity, were pivotal in shaping the mid-20th century America. However, decades of political and corporate opposition, which deliberately dismantled labor protections, fractured this foundation. From the Red Scare to the rise of neoliberalism, the erosion of workers' rights was not an accidental byproduct of economic shifts, but a calculated strategy to prioritize wealth consolidation and corporate power over collective welfare. Today's resurgence of labor organizing at companies such as Amazon and Starbucks demonstrates that these principles remain relevant. Workers are again resisting inequities that have widened over the decades, seeking fair wages, better conditions, and rebalancing power. Understanding this history is essential for the labor movement and society at large. The success of the Golden Era was not spontaneous. They were hard fought and carefully defended. Understanding this history is essential for the labor movement and society at large. The successes of the Golden Era were not spontaneous. They were hard fought and carefully defended. Modern labor advocates must fight for immediate gains and systemic change that aligns with the values of equity, justice, and solidarity that once defined American progress. As the fight for unionization and workers' rights continues, the lessons of the past serve as both a warning and an inspiration. Rebuilding the foundation of shared prosperity will require the same courage and determination that shaped the progressive era. A reminder that progress is always intentional.